The following program is a presentation of the Ohio School Boards Association.
Welcome to the Legal Ledger's Sidebar, where we focus on trending school law topics and other legal issues that matter most to Ohio school districts. I'm Scott Gerfen, and today we're tackling something most people use, that's websites and mobile apps. In April of last year, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a new rule under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA sets specific standards for how public schools and districts must make their websites and mobile apps accessible to people with disabilities. Although the rule was issued last year, we're bringing it up now because the deadline for schools to comply is coming up very quickly. To help us understand what this means and what school boards should be doing now to prepare for this new rule, I'm joined by two of OSBA's fabulous attorneys, Sarah Clark and Jenny Harden. And Sarah, let's start with you. Let's start with the basics. What is this ADA rule all about, and why is it such a big deal for public schools?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on. And so generally, let's go all the way back to the basics. The ADA is, the goal of that is to make sure that people with disabilities aren't shut out or prevented from taking part in or benefiting from the services, the programs, the activities that state and local governments offer to their constituents. And so, as you mentioned, public entities are increasingly using websites, apps, and other technologies to provide access to those services and the programs that they're doing through web content and apps. And so what this new rule does is it basically sets up guidelines for districts and other entities for what they can and what they must do to make those websites and those apps more accessible. And they do that. The Department of Justice, they picked an existing accessibility standard called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA. And so that is the go-to technical standard that they've adopted. And just as a quick aside, I was trying to find, what was the universally accepted abbreviation for how you abbreviate that, and I wasn't able to find one. So the things that I've heard, just as you're using this, in your districts or out in the public, was WCAG, WCAG, or WCAG. So I think all of those are being used professionally out there. So, really, regardless of how it is pronounced, essentially what this rule does is it requires districts and other public entities to review those websites, review those apps, and then bring them into compliance with those WCAG standards.
WCAG,
Yeah.
that is a mouthful. It sounds very technical too, I will say that. And what's all included in the standards, and how is a district going to know whether their websites and apps are compliant?
Yeah, a great question. So the WCAG guidelines are very technical standards, and they use what are called success criteria. And so what they do is they have these requirements that basically ensure that those web content and apps are accessible to people with disabilities. And so the success criterion address particular barriers and then walk through sort of what you have to do to comply with those standards. So, for example, ensuring that images have text descriptions on them would be one success criteria that somebody would want to measure to see whether their website does that. Other examples might be providing captions for video content, making sure that websites can be navigated with just a keyboard, or making sure there's contrast between the text and the background for anyone with a visual impairment. So those, you asked about, how does somebody know whether their website's compliant? Those standards are actually online. We'll post a link to the standards on our blog post. And those guidelines, they actually have a lot of information about each success criterion, and then they provide information about what it means to meet or not meet that. They offer suggestions or solutions or what they call techniques for what a public entity can do to achieve that criterion. And then there's a lot of people who have put together training materials on these. So you can, access training webinars on this.
Yeah.
And there's even websites where you can type in your individual website and they'll sort of flag some potential issues under those standards. You can pick the level of compliance and they'll say, have you considered this or check out this as something you might need to remedy.
So you're sitting here talking about this, I'm thinking here like all the images that would be, or all this other data information that would be on a district website. Jenny, how does a district even go about starting this review, this work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the Department of Justice is here to help you. They've put together a document that they call First Steps Towards Complying with the ADA Web and Mobile Application Rules, so it's very easy to see what they're trying to direct you to do. It's that, by the way, that resource is linked in the blog post. The resource provides links to materials published by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, which is the organization that publishes the WCAG standards that Sarah just mentioned. So those have some additional resources that might be helpful to districts as they're reviewing the new rule requirements. The resources also offer practical steps for districts to take and consider to ensure compliance. These steps include things like identifying the key people on your team who have a role in making sure the district remains or becomes or remains compliant, conducting an inventory of the district's current web content and apps, and prioritizing which content to fix first.
Yeah, so I'm assuming things like how popular a specific page is on a website, that's something a district's going to look at and they consider as, do they prioritize, what to fix?
Yeah, the frequency that people use certain content on your website is definitely one of the things that you should be considering when you're prioritizing your updates. Other factors are things like whether the content appears on multiple web pages like footers or search bars, whether it helps people perform key tasks on your website, and whether the actual users with disabilities have flagged it as difficult to use or inaccessible.
So are there any exceptions to the compliance with this new rule?
Yes, there are. There are 5. And if the content fits into one of these exceptions, then it doesn't have to comply legally with the WCAG standards, but you still may want to provide accessibility and make sure that you're coming into compliance with it. But there are some carve-outs. And so the first one is what they call archived web content. And so that is exactly what it sounds like. It's web content that you're not relying on a daily basis, that sort of captures a moment in time. It may be things like old board minutes or press releases that are sort of frozen, kept online in a special area that's just sort of memorializing what happened in the past. So that would be the first category. The second category is kind of similar to that, but includes what they call pre-existing conventional electronic documents. And so that is a fancy way to say old PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoint files, or Excel files.
Right.
So again, something that was posted before the district's deadline for compliance, and as long as those documents aren't being used to help access the district services or their programs or their activities, then it doesn't need to come into compliance with it. That exception doesn't, however, apply to future content that's posted. So if you are posting new Word documents or PDFs or Excel files, they would need to come into compliance with the new language. The third exception would be content that's posted by a third party. So it's not uncommon for districts to link to content that's created by somebody else other than the district, and some of that may be posted on behalf of the district, and sometimes it's just a helpful resource that the district is offering. So the new rule would require web content and mobile apps that are created by third parties to comply with those WCAG standards if it's being provided, if that content is being provided or it's being made available because there's some sort of underlying contract or license agreement or some other arrangement with the district. So there is an exception, however, if it's truly unaffiliated with the district and is not being provided on behalf of the district. So an example that we could think of would be if you have a social media page for the district and somebody is posting comments on those pages. That's a third-party comment that somebody's posted. It's not that post would not need to comply with this and might fall under this exception.
Yeah, and the fourth exception deals with content that is about a specific person and it has some kind of protection like a password. In that case, while districts have existing ADA obligations to provide accessible versions of those types of secured documents to individuals with disabilities, DOJ recognized that it may be too burdensome for some public agencies to make all of those documents conform to WCAG standards, regardless of whether the individual to whom the document it directly pertains needs the access. So there's a carve out for those documents. And then the final exception applies to pre-existing social media posts. Social media posts made before the district's compliance date don't have to meet the WCAG standards. So there's that's a high level overview of the exceptions. There obviously, districts will have to look at them in more detail to figure out exactly how they apply to their district. And if there's any kind of a question, you can obviously call your legal counsel.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm going to have WCAG. It's going to be in my brain the rest of the day. No, I'm not going to forget it. We've been talking about deadlines for these compliance issues. What are the specific deadlines, Jenny?
Yeah, and we say they're fast approaching, and they're not that quickly approaching, but this is going to be a time-consuming process.
Sure.
So there are two of them, and they differ, or they apply to districts depending on their population. So for districts with a population of 50,000 or more, the compliance deadline is April 24th, 2026. Smaller districts with a population under 50,000 have until April 26th, 2027. When we're talking about population, we mean the number of people who live within the district's territory, and districts should use the should use the 2020 decennial census when determining what their population is.
So obviously, like you said, it's important to get ahead of this because it is going to take some work. You mentioned a number of resources that are already out there. But Sarah, I assume the division also is going to be on standby to help, right?
Yeah, on standby all the time. So yes, absolutely. We're here we can direct you to those resources directly if you have questions about any of those exceptions that we went over. We are available to help walk through this. So the legal hotline, probably the best resource to get a hold of us, and that number is
855.
Yes, I was going to say 1-800, but that's not right. 855 OSBA law. Yes.
And yeah, I know you guys are always there to help all of our members through any of this information. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast, the sidebar to get us up to date on all this. Thank you for watching, and be sure to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time on the Legal Ledger Sidebar.